Wilberforce, Ohio is known for two things: Central State University and Wilberforce University, the nation's oldest private historically Black university owned and operated by African Americans. Wilberforce was named after the 18th century abolitionist William Wilberforce, who coined the phrase, "We are too young to realize that certain things are impossible, so we will do them anyway." Wilberforce was also a hub on the Underground Railroad with 7 action stations. Central State arose from Wilberforce University and was founded as a place of higher learning for African Americans more than 135 years ago. Even though Wilberforce has a rich African American history, I associate the CDP with one of my strongest Black women influences, the Queen Mother, Mrs. Cordelia Hill, who I more affectionately call Dee Dee, partly because she felt too young to be called Grandma when I was born. You may not know who Dee Dee is now, but stick around. You're going to learn today.
Whenever you're down, out in the cold, faithless and dark, your story's untold. Come take my hand and walk there with me. I know a place where we can be free.
I'm Mimi Jax. You may know me from my podcast, Mproper Mimi, where I have discussions about empowering women at home, work, or play. This podcast is a little different. Join me as I speak with the Queen Mother, my grandmother, Mrs. Cordelia Hill, about different experiences of her 92 years of life. You'll also be hearing from some of her children on how she's helped to shape their lives as well. Gems will be dropped and lessons will be learned. Get ready to want to adopt Mrs. Hill as your Queen Mother. This is the legacy of Dee Dee. I say, well, there's two things in Wilberforce. There's Central State, and then there's Wilberforce University. And of course, my grandmother. What is Wilberforce?
Well, Wilberforce it's a Black settlement in southwestern Ohio that was developed before the Civil War. Mm-hmm. Now, you said Wilberforce had two things. Actually, the first thing that it had was Payne Theological Seminary, started here, and Wilberforce University, the school. They were together, so out of those things came up. Wilberforce University was first, 1856, founded by Daniel Payne. And then part of that, Wilberforce University, was the religious school or Payne Theological Seminary. Central State, operated by the state of Ohio, came into being not until 1887. Since that time, though, they've given them HCBU. Wilberforce was the site of an Indian village called Tawawa. They often talk about Tawawa Springs. Mm-hmm. A lot about that isn't known, but it was the home of Shawnee Indian. Tawawa or Tawawa Springs, it was called that because it had been an Indian village, they thought, and Massey's Creek runs just below Wilberforce University of Wilberforce, Ohio. There was a spring there that had mineral water that people came to drink for its medicinal property. That was Tawawa Spring.
Sometimes I just have to shake my head when I hear people say slavery was so long ago. When you stop to think about the number of years our people were enslaved versus the number of years we have been free, no, it was not that long ago. We are just a few generations away from those times. Queen Mother Dee Dee shares her direct correlation of our family lineage and enslavement.
Our family came to Wilberforce around 1924, beginning with my grandparents, George H. Banks and Marie O. Bundsman Banks. George Banks was born in Germantown, Kentucky in 1879. His parents were Eliza Robinson Banks and George H. Banks. Eliza Robinson's brother tells the story that he held his sister Eliza when they were sold in slavery. It seems to us that the Robinson family had more than several slave owners or enslavers, as call them now. In 1851, James Robinson decided he had had enough of slavery in Mason County and decided to cross the river to freedom. His story was that he crossed the river on a log raft and headed for the Rankin House. When he got there, he was assisted by Quakers, and he ended up in Clinton County, Ohio, which had a large Quaker settlement near Wilmington. He became the custodian or the caretaker of the Springfield Church, a Quaker church, and he was caretaker of their cemetery. And he now was in a free place. Around the turn of the century, which was like almost 50 years after the Civil War, he decided to try to find some of his family. He wrote letters to the postmasters in different cities. He didn't know whether they were still in Germantown, Kentucky or not. Well, it so happens that they were. And Eliza, George, and all of their children decided to come north to Clinton County, where he was, and where it was a little bit better living for African Americans. Joyously, they came here. My grandfather married Marie Ola Bungeon from Mount Sterling, Kentucky, Montgomery County, in 1903. And then they also came with the Bankses to Clinton County. Around 1924 or so, they decided to move to Greene County, Ohio, and to the Wilberforce settlement, because Wilberforce had the colleges, and connected with the college was elementary school education, they called the common school education, high school, and the college was all in one. And they came so that their two daughters could get an education at Wilberforce. When my grandfather came to Wilberforce, he purchased land. He got a job working at the farm that the university had, and he himself raised vegetables and hogs. He was sort of like a truck farmer. Oh. In addition to that, he bought a gravel pit, and they sold gravel from that place for several years. His house that he built around 1930 was up on Wilberforce Clifton Road.
The early 1930s were a very trying time for Americans. More than 4 million people were unemployed as a result of the Wall Street crash of 1929. Many African Americans that had entry-level or low-paying jobs lost them to unemployed whites. Through these trying times, there were a lot of amazing firsts as well, such as CBS broadcast the New York Philharmonic live over the radio for the first time. And during this era of radio and financial instability, our Queen Mother Cordelia Hill, aka Dee Dee, was born on October 5th, 1931. So much going on in the United States and around the world, it is amazing to me that Dee Dee grew up watching her grandfather do all he could in rural Ohio to provide for himself and his family. In fact, Papa Banks did a little bit of everything to make ends meet.
He sold gravel, and then he sold produce to grocery stores in Virginia, and then he sold hogs to make money. And he also did special delivery for the United States Post Office. As much as more than genealogy. I mean, I don't care about who was married to whose father and mother was this, that, and the other. It's the historical part, because the genealogy also, the historical part, shows the migration routes.
Yeah, like how you know where people came from.
Because they asked us somewhere, do you know how your family got to be where they are? I know how we got here. And they were surprised because it was really easy. Arnold Braxton, who I believe maybe he related us in some kind of way. He was a famous underground. He took slaves across from Mason County.
Just as our Queen Mother's family first moved to Clinton County, Ohio from Kentucky years before for a better life and education, so too did she move back to Wilberforce, Ohio with her mother and sisters to live with their grandmother, Ola Banks, and grandfather, George H. Banks, who you heard me refer to before as Papa Banks, sometime prior to 1940.
Came to live with our grandmother and grandfather George and Ola Banks, and Wilberforce, Ohio, sometime prior to 1940, when my parents decided to separate. School here at Wilberforce, Ohio, right up the street from us, they had a one-room schoolhouse that was taught by a teacher by the name of Miss Howard. That was the public school for Black people on this side of Greene County. Mm-hmm. And then they had teacher education schools at Wilberforce University. And so we attended the schools called Lucinda Cook Elementary School, and then went on to the academy, which was the high school. Mm. The university had a chaotic time during the 1940s. And in 1947, the combined normal and industrial departments split from Wilberforce University, and in 1951 eventually became Central State University. That was a trying time for kids who were in school because their education was then stopped. My mother did not want us to go to public school. Some of the students from that time went to Yellow Springs, and they were not welcomed there at first. All these things can be detailed in the Senior Gazette during that time about things that happened that were racial inequalities at that time. My sister Betty and I went to Dayton Dunbar High School. Being at Wilberforce University and the type of school we had been, you could earn credits for graduation. And after you got so many credits, then you were able to go on in from the high school to the college, from the academy to the university. Having built up quite a few of the required credits for graduation from a public school in Ohio, by the end of my third year at Dunbar High School, I was able to enter Wilberforce University. Went there for 2 years before I got married, dropped out of school, and went back later on after all the kids had graduated to get my degree from Wilberforce University in 1992.
That's right. When I was about 16, my grandmother, who had survived through the Depression era, gotten married, and birthed 8 children, received her bachelor's degree from Wilberforce University, and I was so proud. In episode 2, Queen Mother Dee Dee will discuss a little more about her childhood and growing up on a farm during the Great Depression. Hear what Christmas time was like when she was younger, and about some of the scariest tornadoes in Ohio history.
There were trees all over the road and everything. Never saw anything like it. It's something you will never forget. And when they give a tornado warning signal goes off, you're just terrified because you know what can really happen.
Join us in the next episode of The Legacy of Dee Dee. Thank you for joining me in this episode of The Legacy of Dee Dee. This series is brought to you by Mproper Mimi, where my mission is to empower women at home, work, and play. Learn more at mpropermimi.com, that's Mproper with an M, where you will also have the power to support this content and more by making a Buy Me a Coffee donation.